What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. We've already predicted the Pac-12 championship game, which I believe is the biggest game during Champ Week, and we'll go with what is the second biggest game, in my opinion, during Champ Week when we preview the always fun SEC championship game in Atlanta, Georgia, and it features two teams that, well, know the bright lights of this stage here pretty well. It's the back-to-back national championship winning Georgia Bulldogs facing the Alabama Crimson Tide. Winner of this one has a real good shot to get into the college football playoff, especially if it is the Alabama Crimson Tide. If it is Georgia, hey, you just solidify yourself there at the number 1 seed. We're going to go ahead and dive into everything Bulldogs and Crimson Tide here in a minute, but before we do that, you guys know I got to say thank you for all the love and support the channel has seen as of late. It does mean a lot to me, and if you want to continue to help show your support for the channel, I mean, hey, pretty much anything you guys do to help interact with the channel helps to support it. So whether that's doing something in a huge way and hitting the subscribe button and ringing the bell, that's going to mean a lot to me, but you also could like the video, you could comment, you could share, and just simply by watching the video, you guys are helping to support this channel, so I appreciate whatever you guys are able to do. Before we dive on into the SEC Championship, got to take a water break. Ooh. Feeling pretty congested today, so water is important. Make sure you stay hydrated and stay healthy. But with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the SEC Championship game between the Bulldogs and Crimson Tide. They met in this game just 2 years ago, and they are going to be back at it now. Again, I do not really expect Georgia and Alabama to move from their current positions in the college football playoff rankings, but in case they have, I am recording this before the new college football playoff rankings have come out, so if the numbers besides the teams are a little bit different, now you know why. Let's go ahead and talk about the Georgia Bulldogs first. In my Pac-12 preview on offense, defense, I think we're going to go offense, defense here. Let's talk about Georgia as a team, as a whole for right now. Let's go ahead and go with their leader, Carson Beck. It was really a struggle for Carson Beck to start to find things, and really he was only targeting Brock Bowers, and it still felt like Carson Beck had a little bit to do to get settled and get comfortable in this offense. Well, boy, has he found it. 3,495 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 picks on 72.4% completion percentage. He's been really, really good. And again, it hasn't just been Brock Bowers. And now, I'm not saying this that it was a good thing. I don't wish injury upon anybody, but it probably was a good thing for the offense when Brock Bowers went down that Carson Beck was able to form chemistry with these other receivers, because now it's not just Brock Bowers that is dangerous. He really was the only guy the offense would key in on because the wide receiver core itself was struggling as well. But now you have Dominic Lovett, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, Ladd McConkey, Ra Thomas, Bell, Delp. There are so many phenomenal weapons in the pass catching room and then in the backfield as well. Daijun Edwards and Kendall Milton. It maybe hasn't have been the dominant Georgia rushing attack that we've seen over the past couple of seasons, but you know what? It's a Georgia rushing attack that's still pretty darn good. Again, Daijun Edwards and Kendall Milton have combined for 21 touchdowns this season. They've been playing really, really well for the Bulldogs this season. Georgia is probably the best team in third down conversions in the country, 56.6%. However, turnovers have plagued this offense a time or two. 6 interceptions to Carson Beck. You give 1 to Stockton as well during his limited playing time, but we'll call it 6 picks for Carson Beck and then 6 fumbles on the year. Again, with that extra interception, you give them 13 turnovers. That's something that could fall the way of the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's a very stingy defense. They love to force turnovers. Oh, but this is also a Georgia offensive line that doesn't really allow a whole lot of pressure. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's move over to the Bulldog defense where, look, it maybe has not have been the most statistically impressive and dominant defense that we've seen from Georgia in the past, but boy, howdy, is this defense still amazing. It's still one of the best in the country. Sure, maybe it doesn't force a whole lot of turnovers, and sure, maybe the pass rush is not as effective in terms of being able to generate sacks as it has been in their national championship winning seasons over the past 2 years. However, when you take a look at this Georgia team, you know that the ability to bull rush the quarterback is still there. They've shown it, and it's really started to come alive as of late. Sure, the rush defense is not as good as it has been in the past couple of years. Is it still really good? Yeah, it's still really good, and the secondary is also still really good. Georgia's forced 13 turnovers on the season, 12 of them have been picks, and you couple that with 41 passes defended, yeah, this is a pretty darn good Georgia secondary as well. So even though the defense might not be as flashy as it has been in years prior, it's still really, really good. Let's move over and talk about the Alabama offensive side here. Jalen Milroe, what a storyline he has been this season, going from getting benched in the game against South Florida to sort of realizing that, like, okay, they need to be able to, like, okay, Jalen Milroe's the best option here. He needs to be able to come back, and then he's still struggling. He's not really hitting receivers. He isn't really finding his flow, and then all of a sudden, it just started to click, and Jalen Milroe is starting to look and is looking like the best version of himself. Now, his stat line is not going to be super impressive to a lot of you, but Jalen Milroe has played really, really well as of late. 2,526 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 6 picks. The most important touchdown of the season, though, came in the closing stages of the Iron Bowl when he threw that ball in the back corner of the end zone to Isaiah Bond. A phenomenal throw, a phenomenal play, and it keeps the college football playoff hopes of the Alabama Crimson Tide alive. Now, Jalen Milroe has a lot of weapons that he can work with, but he's really started to form chemistry with Jermaine Burton and the aforementioned Isaiah Bond, Nyblack, Prentice, Benson, and then even a CJ Dupree has really started to come on and play some pretty big snaps for them as well. Only 8 catches this year, but hey, he is definitely seeing field action. This is an Alabama offense that can throw the ball now. We know Jalen Milroe can run, and he's got a couple reliable running backs back there as well. Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams, they've combined for 10 touchdowns on the season, but Jalen Milroe, 12 rushing touchdowns on the year. Can't discount his ability to be able to get outside of the pocket. We know Georgia's going to be well aware of what Jalen Milroe can do, but the thing with this offense is no, not their third downs, no, not their turnovers. They're pretty good in both of those categories, but the thing that is going to plague Alabama, and the thing that is going to hurt them, especially against a defense like this, is their offensive line. They are allowing 3.25 sacks per game. They are one of the worst offensive lines statistically in sacks allowed in the entire country. That is going to hurt Alabama at some point, and it may very well be here. Let's quickly talk about the Alabama defense, because I all think we know what this Alabama defense is made of, right? You got guys like Turner and Braswell that can get into the backfield and create pressure and get sacks. Both of those guys have 8 sacks this year, and there are so many more weapons on the Alabama defensive front that can create pressure and get back to the quarterback. You take a look at some of the guys in their secondary, especially a guy like Terry and Arnold. 10 passes defended, 5 picks so far this season. When you take a look at as a whole, 12 picks, 5 fumble recoveries. They're really good at forcing turnovers. This is a ball-hawking secondary. And hey, we know that this defensive front can be pretty good. Sure, they can struggle to stop the run at times, but much like the offense has really started to find their stride, this is the defense that has really started to find their stride as of late as well. But let's go ahead and get into your what to watch for. These are kind of like your keys to the game. It's just some things I think you guys should keep an eye on when you pay attention to this one, and we'll tell you where to watch it here in a minute. I just talked about it literally 15 seconds ago, right? This is an Alabama defensive front that we know can stop the run. We know can create pressure to the quarterback, and Carson Beck is not a guy that's going to get outside of the pocket and run really ever if he has to. Now, he does have 128 rushing yards on the season and 3 rushing touchdowns, but I feel like Carson Beck is a lot more comfortable when he's sitting inside the pocket and can find a wide receiver over the middle and can find a wide receiver downfield. He's going to need to bring his A game today. He's going to need to make some plays outside, or not today, but on Saturday. Obviously, he's going to need to be able to get outside of the pocket. He's going to need to be able to roll out. He's going to need to be able to create. There are a lot of things here for the Georgia Bulldogs that are going to happen, and especially through the play of Carson Beck. If Georgia's going to want to come on top here and win this game, it's going to be by far the best test that Georgia's had all season long. Now, speaking of the run game, we know Beck is going to be able to find his wide receivers when he gets his opportunities, such as Bowers and Lovett and Rosemy Jackson and et cetera, et cetera. When I look at the run game here, it has not been as dominant of a run game in years past. Does that matter? No, because it's still pretty good, and we're talking about this season. The run game is going to struggle here. I feel like Alabama's defensive front is going to be able to catch on. They're going to be able to bring the pressure early on in this game. but I think late in the game or in crucial situations, this is a Georgia rushing attack that will break through. It is too good not to. I think it is simply too good for Alabama to hold at bay all game long, and while it may struggle in the early going, I wouldn't have that set into panic if you are a Georgia Bulldog fan. I think you're going to be able to find it in the run game. And the last bullet point I have here is kind of a preview of the way that I'm going to predict this game, so maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but I think the Bulldog defensive front is going to bully the Tide, especially on the line of scrimmage, and that's more so the Bulldogs defensive front. The Bulldogs offensive line might have a little bit of trouble, but that defensive front, we know the weak point of this Alabama defense, head and shoulders above anything else on that offense, is the offensive line. The offensive line is just quite simply not good. You can't really sugarcoat it in any way. Now, the offensive line, transferring into the Alabama keys, they're going to need to buy Milton time to throw. But that really hasn't been the case all season long, right? You have seen plays where Joe Milton has had to run for his life, where Joe Milton has had to create outside of the pocket, where Joe Milton has had to be a guy to step up and make a really, really, really tough play. So being able to buy Joe Milton time, being able to open holes for this run game is going to be really, really crucial. I am watching the play heavily of the Alabama offensive line while this game is going on. If the offensive line does not play probably their best game of the season, I don't think it's going to be a pretty game if you are a fan of the Crimson Tide. Now, defensively, a lot of things that are a lot easier said than done. You got to be able to contain Brock Bowers and don't get beat deep. Play that single high safety, nothing past you, because Carson Beck can sling it. Well, he can sling it, and he's got a lot of weapons that he can sling it too. But this is an Alabama secondary that is really, really good, and it is ball hawking, but you have to be able to contain Brock Bowers. That is your main priority, but you also cannot get beat with the deep ball, because if Georgia's going to be able to hit the deep ball on you, again, this run game is going to be able to find its rhythm, but if you get hit with the deep ball, especially if you get hit with it early and you get beat, that's definitely a recipe for disaster for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But we know the secondary is good enough to be able to step up, right? But you also got to be able to win the line of scrimmage, and again, it starts with that offensive line, but transitioning over to the defensive end, you got to be able to create pressure to Carson Beck. You got to be able to get him on the ground. You got to be able to be really, really good in stopping the run here pretty much all game long as well, and create negative plays and turnovers. I think turnovers are going to be a huge part here in this game. Now, these two teams, in my mind, when I take a look back at it just at face value, I think these are two fairly evenly matched teams. I think both teams have a very good quarterback with a lot of weapons surrounding them, not only in the wide receiver room, but in the rushing backfield as well. I think both defenses have a lot of really, really good attributes to them, specifically with their rush defense, and with Alabama, just the way that secondary can go up and get the football. And hey, I haven't talked a lot about it. Georgia's secondary is really, really good too. They're not even allowing 200 yards per game through the air this season. So I think both these offenses have a lot of really good things. I think have a lot of really good things going for them. And I think both these teams have very, very good defenses. But there are a couple of things that are making me lean one way. And I think you guys know the way that I am leaning. I've kind of alluded to it earlier, but the one thing is I feel like that everything Alabama has, Georgia just does a little bit better. Stopping the pass, while Bama's secondary is ball hawking, I do think Georgia is able to stop the pass a little bit more effectively, a little bit more efficiently. I think Carson Beck is the better quarterback than Jalen Milroe. I think Georgia has the better defensive front, especially in run game, and they may not have the better defensive front of rushing the quarterback, but they will be able to get pressure to Jalen Milroe because of the Alabama offensive line. That is just what is setting this game apart from me. Now, if Alabama's offensive line can come in here and play really, really well, hey, Alabama has more than enough of what they need to be able to win this game. But because of the inconsistency, and I just can't rely on this offensive line to be able to win them this game, or I should say help them win this game, I'm going with Georgia here to get back to the college football playoff and three-peat or actually not three-peat. They didn't win in 2021, but win their second straight SEC championship game here. 27-24 is the way I see it. Let me know how you guys see it in the comment section below. And hey, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.